Hello chess fans, in this video I'm going to show you the fantastic battle between Alireza Firouzja and Magnus Carlsen. And if you have been following the Global Chess League, you may remember their previous encounter where a lot of dramatic things were happening on the board. If you haven't seen this video, make sure to check it out. But just a small reminder that the time control is 20 minutes for both players without any increment, which means there will be some spectacular things happening on the board. Also in this game, it's Alireza who's playing with the white pieces, Magnus with black, and some absolutely dramatic things are happening. I'm going to show you right now. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you do like my videos. And well, here we go. Firouzja starts with 1e4. Magnus goes for the Sicilian, knight f3, e6, d4. Pawn takes, knight takes d4, a6, it's the so-called conf variation. There are a lot of possibilities for white here. One of the main continuations is to place the pawn on c4 when we have the so-called hedgehog structure. So the next 10 moves or so, it's all pretty standard and has been played before by both players. Knight f6, attacking the pawn on e4. White, of course, is gonna protect it with knight c3. Queen c7, a3, preventing the bishop ever coming to b4, b6, bishop e3, bishop b7. Now the pawn on e4 is attacked one more time, therefore white defends it with the move f3, bishop e7, bishop e2, d6, castling kingside by both sides, rook c1, knight bd7, b4. So as I said, all pretty standard. White has a nice space advantage in the center. All the pieces on the board makes it easier for white to maneuver. But on the other hand, black is looking for counter strikes. Rook ac8 played in the previous game between Firouzja and Magnus. Magnus played here the move rook fc8. There are some subtleties, some differences, but let's not go there. Rook ac8 is a more common move. Queen d2. Rook fe8, mysterious rook move, but with a very clear idea. Knight b3, knight goes back, and here also another typical response by black is to drop back with the queen to b8. So the queen is looking okay here. So you're making space for the rook to attack the pawn on c4, especially in combination with knight e5. Rook fd1 played, and here the traditional way of playing is to reroute the bishop from d8, from e7 to d8 and then to c7 to let it form a tandem with the queen to hit the weakness on h2. It's one of the typical ideas to generate active play. Another typical plan is to launch the h-pawn so that the pawn can come to h4, maybe to h3 to create new weaknesses. And especially when that king side will be opened, I believe that white's king is potentially more vulnerable than black's. So here, white goes for the move bishop f4. He's attacking that weakness on d6. It's attacked 3 times now by queen, rook and bishop. But black can block it with knight e5. Excellent response, and you don't have to fear the trade of bishop for the knight. Bishop takes e5 was not played. You can take back, and this double pawn is actually pretty good. I think that especially the dark squares in white's camp, they're quite vulnerable. It will be very difficult to mobilize the queenside majority. So therefore instead, Firouzja played the move knight to a4, attacking the pawn on b6, and black defends it by placing the bishop on c6, attacking the knight while the queen protects the pawn on b6. Knight goes back to b2, and here the move h4. So black is continuing with that plan of creating weaknesses. Something like h3 can be played anytime soon. And now Firouzja plays a remarkable move. He goes for the move queen to e3, and I think he wants to consolidate his king side a bit better, so keep the pawns nicely protected. But it does allow here the move knight g6, as black clearly wants to trade off the knight for the bishop to gain control over the dark squares. Well, there followed bishop g5, logical move, but for instance that knight on b2 also doesn't look a bit strange. There's not optimal coordination between white's pieces, and therefore Magnus grabs the momentum here by striking in the center with the move b6, b5. In fact, it's a strike on the queen side, but the main idea is to gain control over the center by getting rid of the pawn on c4, which will make it easier for black to get in the other pawn break d6, d5. Well, if you're ever going to take on b5, the bishop is going to recapture. White played here the move knight to d4 to attack the bishop on c6, and obviously Magnus can still take on c4, but he says, well, I'm not in a rush. I want to keep that bishop on the board, and he is still looking for plans to open up the queen side, the king side here with the move h4, h3. So therefore, there followed this move h3 by white. So this is a typical move, placing the pawns on the light squares, but the main drawback is that it weakens the dark squares. And now Magnus shows some real understanding by playing the move d6 to d5. That is a beautiful idea, as the main plan is to infiltrate here with the queen to g3 and then put the bishop on d6 so that you are able to come with your queen to h2. Now, of course, white is trying to prevent that and played here the move c5. So he does get a protected passed pawn, and of course he also controls the d6 square. So it will not be easy for black to set up that battery of queen and bishop. Now, black continued here with the move e5, attacking the knight. The knight comes into f5, intending to take the bishop on e7, but it's black who's capturing first. Bishop takes f5, pawn takes f5, and well, the knight on g6 is under threat. But the knight comes in to f4. Excellent move. And the knight is perfectly supported by the pawn on e5. And well, now look at this. Here, Firouzja decided to take the pawn on h4. And well, a pawn is a pawn, but I mean, black is gaining control in the center with these pawns, with his pieces, and played here the move knight to g4, attacking the queen and opening up the diagonal for the bishop on e7 to hit the bishop on h4. Pawn takes g4 was played, bishop takes h4, and now the knight went to d3. The idea is to eliminate the knight on f4 so that you can hit the pawn on d5. The pawn will no longer be protected in that case, but now there is the move d4. Black is attacking the queen. The queen got to keep the bishop defended. Queen went to e4. Knight takes e2, queen takes e2, and if you can set up a blockade here by playing the move queen e4 yourself, white would be in good shape. But it's black's turn. Black goes for the move e4. These pawns are coming forward, and the fact that you're a pawn down as black, it doesn't matter. It's all about the quality of your pawns. You're hitting the knight on d3. The knight went to f2. To attack the pawn on e4, and well, in fact, there are quite a number of interesting options, and the move I do like the most here was not played by Magnus. I would like to go for the move d3, but if you play d3, maybe queen e3, and white is able to set up a blockade, the key move to prepare that plan is to first drop back with the bishop to g5, not only to hit the rook, but to prepare the move d3, preventing that white can block with the queen on e3. This looked like a huge, probably just completely winning advantage for black. But Magnus played here this move, queen f4. He's looking for ways perhaps to ever take on f2, maybe get a winning rook endgame with these huge pawns. White can of course not take the pawn on d4 because it hangs the rook on c1. But rook f1 was played, and now you see that the queen is not that happy on f4. There is a potential discovered attack on the queen, and after some hesitation, Magnus spent a few minutes here calculating the stuff. He decided to go back with the queen to e5, but obviously, well, to me it seems like a small admission that he had missed something in his calculation. Now, rook ce1 was played, attacking the pawn on e4. Okay, the knight on f2 is still pinned, so you got to calculate precisely here. Magnus played here now the move queen to d5. So the rook is protecting the pawn on e4 directly. And well, you can see that white's pieces are standing there, but they can barely move. There's no good way to eliminate that pawn block on e4 and d4. White played here g5. Interesting idea. So the plan is to come in with the queen to g4 to attack that bishop. Now, if you take with the bishop on g5, then white can safely take the pawn on e4. So instead, Magnus played here queen takes f5. Excellent move, because the main point is that knight takes e4, attacking the queen on f5, runs into queen g6. The rook on e1 is under threat, and if the rook moves, then the knight on e4 is no longer sufficiently defended. So instead of taking on e4, they followed the move queen h5, attacking the bishop. And, well, the queen goes back to h7, defending the bishop, offering the exchange of queens. That's typical Magnus. When he has a huge advantage with such pawn block, he always looks at possibilities to simplify. Now, Firouzja is almost the opposite type of player. He likes to keep the position as complex as possible, keeps the queens here on the board, queen g4, keeping an eye on these pawns. But Magnus is running here with the move e3. He's hitting the knight. But look at Firouzja. He's setting up some interesting idea with the move g3. The bishop is also trapped. But what are you going to do? Are you going to take the knight with check? Well, that's what happened in the game, but the bishop remains trapped. Now, the most precise way of converting is to take the pawn on g3. Was not played by Magnus. Remarkably enough, he missed this nice little tactic. The idea is that after queen takes g3, there is this move e2. Now the queen is no longer defending the e2 square. And, well, the rook on f1 is trapped, cannot move. And therefore white is going to be up a full exchange with a decisive advantage. Instead, Magnus captured on f2. But after king takes f2, you can give a check with the queen on c2. King goes back to g1. But as I said, the bishop on h4 is still trapped. So white's going to regain the piece, and things are far from clear. Bishop takes g5, queen takes g5, but Firouzja is really, really low on time. Rook takes e1, rook takes e1. Now Magnus is pushing the pawn. He's 2 squares away from queening the d-pawn, but the queen comes into f5. Excellent defensive resource, hitting the rook, pinning that pawn on d3. Rook f8, rook f1, the d-pawn still cannot move. Queen to c3, and here it is, queen to d5, guys. And here Magnus starts collecting pawns. The queen is controlling the d-pawn. The d-pawn is no longer dangerous. And in fact, if Firouzja would have still a bit more time, he could probably just calculate that rook takes f7 is forcing a draw. Here, look, this is incredible line. If you take with the rook, it's queen d8. And, well, if you block with the rook, there is queen d5. Check, you can go back and forth with queen and rook. If the king goes to the h-file, it is queen h5. The alternative, instead of blocking with the rook, is to go king h7 right away. But there's queen h4, and there's no way for the rook to block the checks. And therefore, this is going to be a repetition by force. But Firouzja, maybe even gambling here a bit, trusting his tactical skills. He's playing for a win himself here. He's pushing the pawn to c6. Now it's queen takes b4. The pawn comes to c7. You are down 2 pawns as white. But maybe this pawn is even more dangerous. Look at this. Queen c4, offering the exchange of queens. Queen d7. As you keep the rook on f8 busy. And white is trying to combine threats against the king with the 8 of the passed pawn. Black played the move d2. Rook d1, and I think this is Magnus, clearly that he is not in his best shape this event. He's missing here a very simple technical win, because what you need to do as black, since you're up material, is take out the sting of the position. If you can get rid of that pawn on c7, it's a very easy win. The key move here is queen c1. As if you do take, you get a new queen and you're up a rook, and you're threatening here to take the rook, because it's a pin on the back rank. And if you take on d2, basically the only move, then you take the pawn on c7, you're 2 pawns up, absolutely game over. But instead, Magnus, he's playing against the time of Firouzja, and Firouzja about having, I think, 14 seconds at this point. Magnus like 1.5 minutes. Play here the move queen c5. Check, king g2. And Magnus says, okay, I'm creating some square for the king. There are never any back rank issues, but here you see that he is just losing the pawn on d2. King g7, queen d8, queen c6, check, king h2, rook e8. So you see that there's still a nice grip on the promotion square. And, well, there are some ideas here for black to come in with the rook to e1 and h1. But that's not what Magnus did. Here, Firouzja played h4. He wants to go h5 and open up the king. But, yeah, Magnus, strangely enough, he decides to deflect the rook with b5, b4, whereas something like rook e1 would have been a very nice move. You're threatening checkmate, and if you block that with rook g2, then it's rook c1. Now the rook is much better placed here. You are about to eliminate the pawn on c7. So again, missed opportunity, but Magnus is trying to play against Firouzja's time. b4 played, h5. If you take on h5, there's queen g5, and all of a sudden there are ideas to get a rook to d8 as well. So things are looking pretty bad if you take the pawn. Magnus plays this move, b3, and well, a lot of ideas here. Queen d4 looks like white is still doing pretty okay, but they're followed rook f2. G takes h5, queen g5 check, blocking the check with the queen. Human response, queen d8, queen e6. You gotta retain control over both your rook and the c8 square. Queen g5, king f8, queen c5. Magnus playing for a win, but he's not making a lot of progress here. In fact, he played queen g6 again, and well, Firouzja goes back with the queen to d8. But look at this remarkable idea. Even when you're material down, always consider the exchange of queens, because here concretely, by taking on g6 and getting the rook to d2, now with the king on g8, you can get your rook to the back rank. Rook d8, pinning the rook on e8 will secure the promotion of white's passed pawn. Very nice idea, missed by Firouzja, but down to 7 seconds. Of course, you cannot really blame him. Queen d8 played, queen e6, queen g5, king h8. Magnus keeps the game going, but now also Firouzja looking for his chance to win the game with rook f6, attacking the queen. If the queen goes away, there might be checkmate on h6. Therefore, the queen should go away by giving a check on e2. King to g1 played, queen d1. And, well, if the king goes back, there is a rook e2 and black is taking over. So here the rook gotta go back. Queen d4 check, rook f2, rook e1, king g2, queen e4. Magnus keeps giving checks, very important, not allowing white to promote the c-pawn. Rook f3 was played, blocking the check, rook e2. And now king goes to h3, queen to e6. If you go to h4, there is rook h2 with checkmate. Don't do that. So white played here g4, pawn takes g4. It's total madness here. Who is attacking whom here? And apparently here you can still hold on with white if you take the pawn. But being short on time, you probably don't like that idea of rook h2, deflecting the king from defending the queen. However, after king takes h2, queen takes g4, the promotion square is still protected, but with rook h3, check, you're forcing the king to go to the g file, the same file as where your queen is. Then it's rook to g3. You're gonna win the queen after giving up the queen for the rook. It turns out that the pawns are promoting at the same time, but white can take the pawn on a6 with a theoretical theoretical drawn queen endgame. This should be a draw anyway, but there followed king to g3. Remarkable idea. And, well, I think Firouzja wanted black to take, which is take the rook, which is in fact what happened. Apparently even stronger is rook c2, just keeping the rook on the board and making sure that the c-pawn is never going to queen. But, I mean, getting lower on time, Magnus feels like, okay, taking the rook is a good move. Why not grabbing the material? However, after queen to h5, king g7, queen g5, looks like it's a repetition of moves because the queen can't interfere here. There is this defensive duty of controlling the promotion square after king f8, queen d8, king g7, and here Firouzja lost on time, even though the position is objectively drawn. Here, if the queen goes back to g5, but running out of time, Firouzja didn't get a chance to keep the game going. Now, this is real payback time, as Magnus is flagging Firouzja in this revenge game with the black pieces. Remember, early in the tournament, it was actually Firouzja who was in a lost position and flagged Magnus. So that is what you can get with this type of rapid games without increment. Very spectacular stuff. Of course, not the highest quality game we have seen of these players before. But nevertheless, very exciting game, lot of interesting moments, and I do hope that you learned a thing or two from watching this video. Let me know in the comments what you think. Thanks for watching once again. See you soon.